Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. If this is your first one, special welcome to you. If you're an old Sales Hacker OG, of course, welcome back. We're very excited for this one. It's going to be a great panel discussion. And what we're going to be talking about is something that is on everyone's mind right now. And it's overcoming the challenges of virtual selling to keep deals moving forward. I think we kind of went through this curve where, COVID happened, everything seemed to really slow down. And then now we're back at this place where conversations are happening, sales conversations are taking place, but it seems to be harder than ever to kind of keep them progressing. That's kind of the sentiment we're hearing, certainly in the market with a lot of our partners. So what we're going to be talking about today is this idea of how do we overcome that? How do we keep pushing them forward? And we've got three incredible guests to help us wrestle with this topic. I am joined by Michael Cipolla, the VP of Enterprise Sales at DocuSign, Mark Eldridge, the Director of Legal Operations at Flowserve. Really interested to hear that perspective. And then Heather Foidart, who is a sales coach at Replays, as well as a director. So Heather, Mark, Michael, welcome to the Sales Hacker community.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I'm pumped to have you all. And, I can sit here and give your backgrounds, but it's always better if we hear it from you. So I would love to, I usually put it as hear your superhero origin story. So you've all had incredible, careers in your given fields. How did you get there? Quick, kind of 2-3 minutes would be awesome. And Heather, you don't mind, let's start with you.
Yeah, happy to. So I had a little bit of an unconventional start to my sales career. I spent the first 8 years in financial services, really unsure what I wanted to do in the long run. So did everything from operations to account management, customer service, and then eventually found my calling in sales. I found what I really loved to do was help customers problem solve. I was forever, a lifelong learner and a student of business. And so it was just a really great fit for me, for somebody who was always really naturally curious. So when I first started in sales, started, of course, as an individual contributor, always on the enterprise side. And again, really found my sweet spot with, B2B SaaS companies. Really loved the fast pace, loved, they were innovative, forward leaning, all really great fits for my personality. And so for the past 10 years, I've been both an individual contributor as an enterprise seller, all the way to VP of sales for 2 different organizations. And now with Replays, love coaching other AEs to find success, and also a seller myself for a company called Coconut Software.
Amazing. Such a great career, and we're lucky to have you. Excited to pick your brain on this topic. Mark, let's go with you next. What's the superhero origin story of Mr. Mark Eldridge?
Yeah, I'm going to echo Heather a little bit because mine was a little unusual too. So I basically got into working for a friend of mine's dad back in high school, working in a laboratory doing forensics. And I guess they realized that I had a bit of a characteristic to me that I could do sales. And they put me in sales, and I doubled the sales volume of the company in 2 years. And so they kind of be a natural knack for it. They moved me on to project management, moving on to kind of more of an executive sales role, kind of handling the big level players. And then from there, moved on to McAfee, where I headed up their forensics and e-discovery department. So basically handling kind of the business side of e-discovery and forensics for McAfee, headed up a lot of the government bidding and contracting over there too. And moved from there to Flowserve, where I've been there for 8 years, a little over 8 years. And I kind of have 1 foot in the door of tech, 1 foot in the door of sales, and 1 foot in the door of legal for my, past roles. So I kind of fit this interesting kind of mix of understanding the legal side of things, understanding what the business wants, helping them make it happen, and then also understand the technology side of things, right? And that's what I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but where CLM kind of comes into the mix, right? We're using contract lifecycle management to really kind of expedite the sales process, streamline it, and make it faster and better. So that's really kind of my origin story.
I love that. And it's one of those things that, certainly the enterprise sellers and a lot of the sellers on this call, legal is sometimes something that a lot of us struggle with, can be kind of the scary part of a lot of deals. So excited to to get your take on this. And I know, personally, just legal seems to be much more stringent these days as COVID, and they seem to be looking over everything, maybe 3-4 times,
yeah.
not just
Force
twice.
majeure and all those kind of fun clauses that they're worried about. Oh yeah.
Yeah, totally. And last but not least, Michael, my man, superhero origin story.
Well, Scott, I appreciate the not least part. Not so sure it's a superhero story, but my story is one of those kind of typical, starting sales. I was very fortunate coming out of school. Got very lucky meeting an individual who introduced me to Oracle, is where I started my career. Spent 5-6 years there. Really just kind of dove in water over my head to the earlier discussion, and went straight into a closing role. Didn't know what the heck I was doing. Really learned on the fly and had a couple of different roles there, both as individual contributors, leading the team of account executives, and then moved over to DocuSign. And, I think on the call we had some, mostly sellers on the B2B sales side. I moved from a B2B sales world to more of a corporate function. And when I moved to DocuSign, I was asked to kind of do the chief of staff thing to our CEO. It was very, very cool role in a lot of different capacities. But from a learning perspective, it was kind of one of those like Harvard MBAs on steroids, is how it was positioned to me before I took on the role, which is really exciting to me. And it turned out to be just that. So did that for 2 years. And now for the past 3 at DocuSign or so, I've been leading up our enterprise sales teams. So currently I lead up our West Coast enterprise business, so large accounts, and I've got a team kind of peppered throughout the West Coast and having a ball doing it.
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute. That's super, super interesting. And that chief of staff role must have been incredible, because you get to put your hands in all these different projects. You get to see that, what the top execs are doing every day. If you could impart one piece of wisdom you learned from that role, because I think it's a very unique role, and you get a spot on, and it's like your MBA on steroids. What wisdom would you pass on from those years?
Man, how much time do we have? The one thing I would say is, as sellers, first line, second line, third line, we often think in the terms of like, okay, business value. How do I think like my customer? I would say one of the biggest lessons learned from that experience was you're actually on the other side of the table, right? You are understanding how each of the different departments and divisions think, what's important to them. And beyond that, just the mark of great leadership. If I were to sum it up, it would come down to those that can inspire, right? How do you get your team to run through a brick wall? How do you inspire a vision? So the best leaders, whether it's at this, C-suite level or senior leadership level, in my mind, are those that have a, innate ability to inspire their teams.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I like that a lot. Thanks for sharing. All right. So I want to jump in, and before we go into the topic, I want to do a couple polls. And just as we kind of launch the polls, and the first one I want to do is, what's the biggest challenge you're facing today? So we'll give you some time on that one. And as those results are coming in, super quick housekeeping on this webinar. So 2 things. Number one, these are all recorded. So for whatever reason, you got to jump off, you got to close the deal, you got to go to do some coaching with your leader, whatever it is, or your kids are screaming in the background, all sorts of work from home challenges now. It's okay. We will send this to you within about 24 hours when we wrap up. And number 2, as I kind of talked about, this will be a panel discussion. We've got some talking points that we really want to hammer home, but these are always much more fun when these are interactive. So there is a chat feature. Please jump on, introduce yourself, your name, your title, where you're from. It's always nice to see who we're rocking with. And then secondarily, there is a Q&A feature, which I'll be manning. So if you have some, hyper relevant questions that you have pertaining to this topic, we're here to answer them. So please get those in, and we'll make sure we layer those in throughout. I've got Steve Burnside saying there's no sound. Is anyone else having trouble with no sound? Chat if you are. All good. Okay, cool. We are ready to rock. Okay, let's close up this first initial poll. All right, so we have 45% saying the biggest challenge they're facing today is booking that initial meeting. So just getting that initial like interest at all. Number 3 is 3% greater deal scrutiny. 36 is very relevant to this, keeping deals moving throughout the sales process, and 15% say closing deals within a reasonable time frame. Heather, does this shock you? Is this kind of what you're hearing and feeling out there in the market as well?
Yeah, I think so. Especially with booking initial meetings, I actually coach some of the account executives over at Vidyard. And so I talk with them sort of day in and day out about what they're doing to book initial meetings, but also, again, using their platform themselves. So I've heard from a lot of sellers, myself included, having a lot of success using kind of asynchronous tools like sending over personalized videos to help book some of those initial meetings and, get through the clutter. The second thing I've seen that's working really well is, keeping that mindset of kind of a mobile first environment. So, everybody is working from home. If you're sending out some cold emails, you're sending videos, often those are going to be read on a cell phone. And so one of the kind of tactical tips I've been telling people lately is, send yourself a copy of that email and see how it looks and reads on your mobile device. And I think that's, changing the way that we're communicating, being a little more brief to the point, and a little bit more creative with the words we're choosing.
Mm-hmm. Such a great point on that mobile first. I think at my inbox, I get that little preview that I think has 8 words. And from those 8 words, I decide I archive this, delete this, or should I respond? And that's it. And I try and do all my emails from mobile. And I think most people do now. All right. That's super interesting. Let's do one more poll and then we're going to dive into it. I want to know, since we just found out people are having trouble getting their deals moving forward, what have you been doing to try and keep those deals moving forward? Any guesses, Mark, where you think people will land on this one?
Oh man, I'm thinking probably more flexible deal and payment terms. That's usually been our issue.
Yeah, we're seeing that as well. Some people, I find even some larger enterprise companies are seeing almost COVID as an opportunity, to maybe get some better terms on multi-year deals and things, which is interesting. Michael, what are you seeing? What do you think people have been doing to try and keep these deals moving forward?
Well, I'm anchoring on the executive sponsor angle.
Yeah.
You mentioned enterprise sales. I think that, on the previous poll, we talked about how hard it is to book meetings, especially initial meetings. Priorities have changed, and the COVID has thrown a massive monkey wrench into corporations thinking on what's important to them. But for what is important to them in this idea of keeping deals moving forward, being single threaded doesn't work. Finding the stakeholders, the sponsors who this is the most important thing or top 3 item. That's how we're able to keep these opportunities moving forward.
Yeah. Excited to talk more about that one for sure. I think it's so important in today's day and age. All right, let's stop this poll. See what we got. All right. So what have you been doing to keep deals moving? So this is interesting. 51% say higher volume of communications, more calls, more emails. I think seems to always be our default in sales. Oh, it's not working. Let's do more of it. But I've certainly found in my career that more doesn't always mean better, and more doesn't always drive the outcome you want. Sometimes you're just going faster in the wrong direction. But that's super interesting. 14% says using new tech. That's an interesting way to kind of approach this. Let's see if we can bring in some tools to help us. 26% agree with Mark, more flexible deal and payment terms. And then 34%, are looping in more exec sponsors to help close deals. So that's really interesting. When you look at that, Mark, what is what are your thoughts on that? That 51%, almost half of people are just saying, hey, we just got to do more. I'm doing more.
Yeah, just kind of like, just hammering the communication channels until you basically get people to kind of bend to your will. I've really been a fan of it, to be honest. Reason being that I feel if you have to sit there and just basically hassle people until they kind of collapse on the deal, it's not really building a long-term relationship, right? I found, at least in our industry in Flowserve, right, it's manufacturing. So a lot of these relationships are really old, and these deals go on for decades, right? So really have to build a really strong partnership with them, right? And that's done through, basically providing a service that the other guys can't provide, right? Solving problems for them that either they don't know exist or they just can't solve right now themselves, right? We've seen a lot of that in COVID, right? When the travel lockdown kind of came down, a lot of these guys in the supply chain for our customers, right, couldn't make out to a lot of their big manufacturing sites, right? So they weren't able to really assess what they needed, assess what needs to be repaired, what needs maintenance, right? But we have a lot of what we call our QRCs, is our quick response coordination centers. So they're all over the world. So we say, hey, that's all right. We'll send one of our guys out free of charge. He'll go out, he'll assess it for you, take pictures and send it back to you, right? And that's all free of charge, right? And that's kind of an easy way to show value add. And really, it's a way of communicating, but the way of communicating to them, it isn't just like, nonstop emails, which I feel like it's kind of spinning your wheels. You're not making motion, you're just kind of spinning. So, and that to them is a big value add because we're able to, bridge the gap for them, kind of be malleable when they can't be malleable. And that builds a long-term relationship that they'll always remember. They'll look back on it and say, those dudes from Flowserve showed up and did something for me that I didn't have to pay them for. Right.
Yeah. That's huge. That's huge. And it's, that's your particular, example, but, anyone on the line right now, think of how that would apply to you. Like, what is some sort of high value activity that you can drive for customers right now that isn't a massive lift from your team, but is inherently valuable far beyond just your product or your service. I really like that line of thinking. My 2 cents on the results there. Higher volume of communication. It seems like everyone is doing that. I read a stat like there's 30% more emails being sent now since COVID. So there's a lot of diminishing returns, right? If you're sending all of this communication, but so is everyone else, it's going to be harder and harder to stand out. And then it leads to the results we just saw, which is harder than ever to book that meeting. So you got to get super creative and go where people aren't. All right. That was super helpful. Thank you all for getting involved in that poll. Quick shout out. We've got Sean Lee, Janice Kim, Simon, Madry, Shannon, bunch of people joining us. So thank you all from all over the world. I saw Poland was in the house. That's amazing. Boston. All right. First question, and Heather, I'm going to go with you to start. So we just did, and we kind of polled the audience, but I would love through your lens, what is different about selling today? Why are we talking about this in the first place? What has changed, and what's the same?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with kind of what's much of the same. So, at Replays, I have a unique perspective. I get to watch kind of account executives on their demo videos, their discovery videos, sort of day in and day out. And I think a lot of the best practices have stayed much of the same. You really need to double down on, your discovery. I think the account executives that over prepare versus under prepare are better suited to, get their prospects' attention, keep their deals moving. I think, when I think about what's changed, though, I think, we often think about it from a seller's point of view, but I think it's really important to also think about it from your buyer's point of view, like what's changed for them. Just this morning, actually, I was working with a tier 1 bank. They've had a project on the go for quite some time, and they really wanted to work with Coconut on a specific project, but they were having a hard time getting their own kind of executive sponsorship to move forward with this project. There's more competing priorities than ever. And so we spent about an hour this morning working collaboratively on building out sort of this airtight business case that really showed tangible results and benefits. We kind of dry run with each other. We put together an ROI calculator. We're getting together again tomorrow to, go over the pitch. She's going to take it to her boss, do the first round, then I'm going to come in and help her with the second one once she gets some of those early questions out of the way. And so it's really being, consultative and, helping your buyers get deals done as well. I think, it's just as hard for them to get, budget, to get executive support as it is for the sellers. And so if you position yourself as somebody who's on the same side of the table as them, not across the table as a vendor, you put yourself into that competitive bucket. You want to help them navigate, their own challenges internally to get business done.
Mm-hmm. I love that reframe. How, buyers don't want these things to be more complex, right? If you are solving a problem that they have, they want to get it done, but it is more difficult for them. It's just not just more difficult for you to sell. It's more difficult than ever to buy right now. I love that reframe. And anytime you can put yourself on the same side of the table, it's a huge win. Mark, I'll go to same question for you. What are you seeing that's different about selling today? And you can approach it through the angle of, what's changed or maybe what's stayed the same.
A lot of what's changed is, this industry, manufacturing, is kind of old, right? And it's used to old handshake deals and meeting in person and meeting on the site at facilities all around the world, right? With the travel restrictions and with, going towards a virtual environment. It's a big culture shift. I know for the tech side of things, for those who are in the tech side of sales, that's something we've all been used to, right? We've all kind of been used to doing virtual meetings and doing lots of stuff, not in person. But for guys in manufacturing, this is new to them, right? And they're having to adapt in terms of their methods of communication, their follow-up, right? A lot of things they would hammer out in, an hour or two over lunch or at the site, they got to do now by email or do through, through webinars, through WebExes. So for them, it's a lot of adaptation, right, to the changes, right? And we've had to kind of change the way we communicate, change the way we follow up, right? More documentation, right? Because it used to be kind of meet in person, hammer out the PO, send it over to them. Now we got to sit there and find out, okay, where did I leave off on that, right? Well, I think I left off with getting a PO. I think I did that for him. I don't know. Did I get him what he needed last one? So a lot of the stuff we had to put in new controls, right? New workflows, new processes, really make sure nothing gets lost, right? And we lean on technology heavy for that, to make sure nothing gets left off and we know who's got the last, where the ball sits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I spend a lot of my time in kind of the tech world, but we often complain that there's so much changes happening, but manufacturing, insurance, all of these things that are more, quote unquote, traditional industries are literally flipped on their head right now. Digital transformation sped up by like 3 to 5 years overnight. What are you seeing the makeup of what makes a successful seller change? Because you got to think that someone who can maybe command a boardroom and tell a compelling story maybe won't be the same person that needs to coordinate multiple stakeholders to get together on a Zoom and all of these different things. Are you seeing it be a different skill set, or can it all be taught? I would love your thoughts on that quickly.
That's a great question, right? Because we have a very diverse workforce, and we have some people that have just a different time period, right? So for them, this is kind of hard for them to adapt. It's kind of new virtual environment, right? But I think a lot of them are catching on to it, right? And they're seeing some benefits of it in a lot of ways, right? What we've really harped on making sure they understand is how much money we're saving from a travel perspective, also how much time we save, right? I mean, it's, depending on the deal size, it can be beneficial to fly someone to South Korea, right? But then again, it's not always beneficial to fly someone out, all over the world for a one-time deal or just go chasing a little bit of money. So it tells them, like, you're getting a lot more time at home. You get more time to think more creatively, because a lot of the deals we're getting asked for from our customers is being more creative, right? Mm-hmm. So we're trying to change the way we do our deals, change the way we structure them, change all the language around it, right? And that takes time. It takes time to be kind of an innovator, to be a thought leader, right? If you're on the road all the time, it's really, you're getting a lot of that downtime. You get on planes and cars and everything else to sit there and think, but it's not quality downtime. You're still thinking about the meeting coming up. You can't sit there and fully dedicate yourself, right, to something. And that's what we've been trying to tell them, is, hey, focus on this quality time. Use this as creative time to do things better, right? Increase our partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that line of thinking a lot. I think there's this like false thought that when you automate, when you bring in technology, whether it's DocuSign, other sales tech, tools, that the more you automate, the less human it's going to get. But I've found it's really quite the opposite. The more you can automate, the more your systems and process are working on the small things, the more time you have to think creatively and bring out the human aspect of sales. So it's something I love seeing that kind of trend, and I agree with everything you said there. Michael, what are you seeing from your perspective? I mean, DocuSign was a bit more of a traditional kind of inside sales model leading up to COVID, but this did change a lot of things. There's no events, you can't throw the dinners, you can't do the things. What are the biggest differences that you're seeing today, and then maybe some of the things that stayed the same?
Sure. Well, yeah, and I would say that a good chunk of our business is inside sales by nature. There's a large component that's hybrid. There's a large component that's more the typical field sales as we think of B2B tech sales. But in terms of really what's the same, I mean, my perspective and what I'm seeing is companies are going to make decisions for the same reasons they always have, right? Like we talked about earlier, is this investment, is this purchase going to make me money, save me money, mitigate risk, right? All things are going to fall into that bucket. Even things like customer experience, right? My customers get a better experience. Ultimately, it means we're going to potentially make more money as a business. That hasn't changed. What has changed is in the past 7, 8, 9 months, what's a priority? Because what might have been a priority in January, in July, it's different. Companies are disrupting themselves. Companies are being forced to morph, to think about how do we disrupt ourselves? How do we innovate? And that's directly related to us as, kind of go-to-market teams as sellers. We need to think like them, right? Research, understand, put yourselves in their shoes. What's their business going through? Because if we're talking about, to the poll question, getting more meetings, what worked 9 months ago probably isn't going to work today, depending on what their business is up to and the level of disruption. On the what's kind of different framing, I do think that the remote work has an impact, right? And Scott, your question to Mark around like, has it changed the level of how good a salesperson is? Has it changed today? I think that as hiring managers, as go-to-market teams, we find people's strengths, we find seller strengths, and we really put an exclamation mark next to them, right? Some seller strengths, right? We all have them. Like they just shine in a room with people physically, and they go in, they own the conversation, they know people first. It's just there's that commanding kind of like orchestration. That skill set goes away. You're not able to leverage that. So that strength that a seller might have, they need to augment, they need to disrupt themselves in this digital first kind of video conference environment. So that's one of the major changes I'm seeing at the enterprise side. But the good thing is there's ways to improve that, right? The first is acknowledging that, hey, that's a skill I had. How do I get really good at Zoom meetings, right? How do I be better than everybody else on Zoom meetings? So those are some of the things I'm seeing out there.
Yeah, I like those, and I feel like that could be a whole other interesting webinar too. Is how do you actually do effective Zoom meetings? Because we've all been on some that are just like kind of odd, and they're using the same tactics of like, hey, I'm presenting to a bunch of people. They're using the same tactics, but it's different. You need to acknowledge everyone individually. It's not just a group. Anyway, I digress. That's another one that we should definitely tackle. So something you said there, which I really liked and I want to hone in on, is decisions get made for 3 reasons of businesses: make money, save money, or mitigate risk. Right now in this environment, if you had to hang your hat on one, what would it be? Do you think priorities have shifted? Are those all equal right now? What is the one that most companies are focused on, in your opinion?
I believe it's a case-by-case basis, really depending on the business, the industry, the scale. For the reason that some businesses are much more impacted by the pandemic than others. And so if I'm I'm in the hospitality industry, for example, like the way I'm going to be thinking about spending money and making investments is going to be different than if I'm in the high tech space, helping companies get back to work. And, to Mark's earlier points, be a digital first company versus the way we've done things for the past 50 years that our employees tend to know. So it's tough to give a ranking there, but it really depends on the industry.
Yeah. It was a hard question. It was, and I don't think there's a right answer.
The answer is always it depends, Scott.
It always depends. It truly is. I've seen mitigate risk seem to play a little bit more of a role in at least some of the conversations I've been having. All right, so I want to loop back to Heather, something that you said, which was essentially this idea where we need to now think from a buyer's perspective. And I want to talk through about how customers' expectations have changed, because they have changed pretty dramatically, in my opinion. But before I do get to that question, I want to quickly go to the community. Carly Stevens has a really relevant question. It sounds like something that she's currently dealing with. So let's see if we can help Carly out. Carly says, I have sent multiple proposals and have followed up multiple times with no response. Do any of you have creative ways to grab their attention or to speed up the process to have them give you a direct answer? So assuming you had a call, it went well, they asked for a proposal, and boom, darkness. Heather, let's start with you on this one. Anything you've seen, done yourself to help? It's always a hard situation to be in.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think I always have to preface this with the best practice, of course, is always to make sure that you review pricing live. It's amazing how many times I still see this where people are just sending over a proposal by email. I absolutely do not do that. I think you have to set the expectation earlier on that it's a partnership. If you're going to put the time to put together that price quote, you're expecting the conversation back, even if it's just 15 minutes. I think I'm a big fan of the breakup email, I guess, in that case, especially for sort of if it was a smaller opportunity, maybe it sounds like it might be a bit more of a transactional sale. Just asking, it sounds like this isn't a priority for you anymore, and getting that feedback directly. I'm always a big fan of, qualifying early on, every single touch point, making sure that you're realigning around expectations, understanding where this project or initiative sits on the priority list. And that should be happening kind of at every conversation at every level in the organization, and just creating that space to say it's okay if it's no longer a priority, but then you need to get on and move on to some other opportunities that do prioritize your solution.
Yeah, I like that. And I want to underscore something you said there around going over pricing. I think young sellers in particular, or maybe not young sellers, novice sellers, there's such a tendency to be like, oh yeah, no, if it's going good, you don't want to disrupt how good it's going. And you think that by pricing, you're going to disrupt that. So like, oh yeah, I'll just send over an email with all our pricing and super detailed, we'll be fine. And yeah, make sure you spend that time. And that means allowing yourself proper time to set next steps at the end of the call and all that. So that's a huge one.
Yeah, I would also add too, just to that point, don't be afraid to kind of verbal anchor price too, just to make sure it's in the right ballpark. I think, being on the buying side of the table, there's nothing worse than, you have to talk to an SDR twice, and then you have to go through 3 discoveries and attend this demo before I let you know if it's $10 million or $100,000. Don't be afraid to give some, verbal ballparks early on. I think that helps with, again, putting yourself in the buyer's shoes.
For sure. Mark, would love your perspective on this as well, from the legal side of the house. Like, there could be a world that they're just, working through some legal things. What would you coach people maybe from putting your buying hat on a little bit for when sellers are faced with this?
Totally. I think Heather really resonated with me there on the kind of get in front of it and say, okay, what's your ballpark, cost? What's your budget, right? I need to know this up front. That way I don't give you some shock factor kind of, price at the end of it, right? And don't be afraid to start coming out with some of the, find out from legal or find out from your commercial operations team or whoever really handles your T's and C's. Find out what their big button issue is. The things they won't move on. Is it like their damages? Is it, limitation of liability, indemnification, whatever it may be? Find out what the stuff is that they don't want to move on and say, okay, let me know that up front. That way I can start kind of broaching those topics now and see what their temperature is, right? Because this makes the whole, rest of the deal a lot easier when you kind of put most of your laundry on the table, right? You kind of airing it out and say, hey, this is stuff that we can move on, stuff we can't move on, right? Let me know what your budget is, right? I can work with that. Now I can kind of make the deal, more in your range, right? And I think it's important to kind of, don't be afraid to lead quick, right? To come out and kind of start feeling them out and see what their, check their temperature, right? Because I think too often we wait till the end of it with the legal perspective and say, oh, great, by the way, they want to have all IP that maybe, derive from this partnership. Legal's just going to, throw a fit, like no one's getting the IP. Like, no way, we're not going to, anything comes out of this, we're keeping it, right? And you get these deal breakers that come at the end of the deal, and you've worked really hard to get to this point. Now legal's getting involved or whoever else, and they're saying, no, not happening, we're not doing this, not doing that. And it kind of gives the customer a bad taste, right? So it's better to kind of iron that out in the beginning.
Yeah. I was always taught that, the hard questions have to be asked eventually. So you might as well get them up front when you can actually do something about them, because they will come to light. Something I popped in my head there too, the importance of mutual action plans as well, right? Not just setting a next steps, but setting up a mutual action plan of, hey, if we don't follow this plan that you kind of agreed to on the call, here is the kind of the current state, which you've said is not where you want to be, and you're going to stay in that current state if we don't hit these milestones. And then it's much easier to just say it in their own words, be like, hey, we agreed that this is what we were gonna do. If we don't make this happen by the end of this week, we're not gonna be able to fix this challenge for you on the set timeline that we had. Big fan of mutual action plans. Michael, what does your kind of team do when you're put in this scenario?
Well, I love the commentary. All the feedback you guys have shared, I think, is spot on. Particularly what stands out is the idea that, never share pricing unless you're on a face-to-face video conference, some sort of formal call to walk them through the components. Because as part of that, best practice we always use, of course, is, you set up next steps. And with those next steps, there's call it, Scott, to your point, mutual action plan, mutual close plan. There's a set of things that happen with dates associated with it that you can exit a call or a meeting having a level of agreement to. So in the scenario where your contact is not getting back to you, you have a reference point to say, hey, we're off track here. Sounds like something happened. So that's a point I just double down on. And then, the second thing is, time is money. There's an opportunity cost associated with, overspending time on things. If the answer is not a fit, not the right time, as hard as it is for us sellers to walk away from deals, sometimes it's best to fail fast, right? Because the time you spend, fixating on, oh man, what do we do? If it's transactional, it's like spend your time going and finding the next great opportunity. So that's something we talk a lot about as well.
Yeah. That's huge. I hope that answered your question, Carly. Carly says, thank you, appreciate it. Awesome. All right, let's loop back to the initial question. And Heather, I'll start with you again on this one. How have customers' expectations changed through this crazy year we've had?
Yeah, I'll add to a couple of the earlier points I think that both Mark and Michael raised. Mark was sharing in manufacturing that industry's been flipped upside down. And, I think Michael had mentioned, the rate of digital transformation is sped up, 3-5 times. Personally, I sell into financial services exclusively, and, they've been impacted from a digital transformation perspective, both as a result of, the pandemic, but also because of the increase in competition from fintech companies who can, work and act and pivot a lot faster than they can. And so I'm finding when I'm having a lot of conversations, there's no such thing as a one-call close anymore, or a lead that comes inbound, you send a proposal, it's a done deal. Sellers really need to have a broader skill set and be, a partner in innovation, I'll call it, or a partner in that digital transformation process. And so
Mhm.
I find, even in my, sales calls, I'm spending a lot less time talking about, the solution, and I'm spending a lot more time talking and learning about their business. So the use case and, their future state, as Michael mentioned earlier. I'm also spending a lot more time doubling down on change management. And, the skill set that I personally am wearing now is one a lot more of a thought leader and a project manager, it feels like. I don't feel like a seller anymore. So I think, for sellers, the one kind of piece of advice I think is so important now, because customers expect it. They expect you to be a thought leader. They want to hear what other customers like them are doing. They want to hear it honestly too, by the way. You can't just sell, puppies and rainbows. You have to tell them like what the risk factors are, what the speed bumps are going to be. And, if you get in front of it early on, you really position yourself as that, trusted advisor. That's, that concept that we've talked about for the past, 15 years in sales. I just think the customers expect it a little differently. Sometimes I know a lot of the account executives I'm coaching will ask me kind of the how, and I think the how, we're all in a digital world. There's so many webinars like this great one today, or, webinars throughout Sales Hacker, other, industry platforms, take advantage of that and, attend the ones that your prospects are attending, and, listen to the ones that your prospects are speaking on, read their Glassdoor reviews, find out what their employees are saying, and, go to their investor relations websites if they're public companies, or Crunchbase if it's private, really get intimate with their business. And, I think customers expect you to.
Mhm. Yeah, ton of great points there. I like your thought around not just consuming, how to become a better seller and things like this, but hyper industry specific content so that you can have an opinion and a hypothesis in your industry is huge. Michael, I'll go to you with a similar question, but through the lens of, do you see all these changes sticking around? Which ones are going to stick around? Let's say COVID magically disappears in January, which unfortunately it's not going to. But if it did, do you think that the reality has been burst and this is the new way of doing things now?
I do. I think that I'm not quite as extreme as some, but what I will say, and I think Mark hit on the head in the manufacturing sector, there's two components where, think of organizations, board of directors and executive teams are somewhat surprised by how their teams have been able to pivot, right? Number one is their teams, right? Being able to work remote. A lot of organizations, haven't had remote autonomy for a lot of different department responsibilities. And in these times, they're being forced to. And it's kind of being thrown into the deep end. And I think organizations are pretty pleasantly surprised that, hey, we can be productive by having folks have the autonomy to work at home. So I see an element where that will long-term stay the case for sure. And then on the disruption side, we talked about it earlier. I think that a lot of organizations that might be a little bit more of the laggard type, less digital first, they've been somewhat pushed to expedite their digital transformations, we'll call it. And while there's a learning curve associated with it, I think there's some, it's going to be tough to go backwards, back to the old way of doing things, right? It's slower, it's manual, etc. And so that, in my mind, is going to stick around and call it the next 12 to 24 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think there's no putting the cat back in the bag, so to speak. All right, so we've got about 15 minutes left together, and I want to spend some time answering the questions we have coming through, but also proposing some things that are actually working for all of us, because there is deals getting done. It's not all doom and gloom. Numbers are being hit. People are exceeding quota. There is positive things out there. Let's go through just kind of stage by stage through the sales process. We'll start with like discovery / pitch, then go into like the demo, and then some tips around what is working. And Heather, I would love to hear from you. Obviously, you have such a unique insight into seeing, hundreds of hours of people's, demos let's talk a little bit through discovery and what are some specific examples of what's worked at your company or others that you've seen.
Yeah, for sure. So, there's so many great technology available today. I'm a huge fan of, both Gong and Chorus. And I think when I look at the top sellers that I coach, there's one thing that they consistently do. And, that's in their discovery calls. They aim to have that talk and listen ratio of 50%, meaning they're talking 50% of the time, listening 50% of the time. And I'd also add that, the best sellers, they're showing up at the plan. For myself, I've been in sales a really long time. I approach every sales call with, well thought out discovery questions, things I want to learn. I think about how I want to make my prospects feel. It's so important, even if you know your product inside and out, your industry's inside and out, you need to have a plan every time. And, it's just as important as always. I really aim for that, 50-50 talk listen time.
Mm-hmm. That's huge, huge, huge. Is there any way, can you manually do that? If you don't have a Gong and a Chorus, get a little stopwatch or something. Is there any way to track that if you don't have a conversational intelligence tool?
I think I'm not sure about tracking it, but I know I've given. It's a little bit funny. I had an AE that I was coaching, and he was always prone to talk over his prospects. He'd just get really excited about his ideas. He had so much passion, and so my kind of tactical advice to him was, put yourself on mute on Zoom, and then use the space bar when you want to talk. So even when you're inclined to jump in and you interrupt and throw in that next word, you have to make the active motion of pressing down the space bar to talk, and that seemed to help him out.
I like it. I like that. That's very tactical. Michael, let's talk a little bit about demoing in this environment. You got to think your buyer is on the other side. They have more distractions than ever, maybe. What has been working for you, and any sort of specific examples of what you're seeing work?
Sure. Yeah. Well, in the world of kind of demoing proposals, et cetera. We've talked a lot about it, but it's about time, right? Our customers are going back to back to back to back to back. I mean, if you're getting a customer at 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're on their 15th Zoom call. And so the question when we're doing these, hey, let us show you all the shiny objects of what we're talking about. Be mindful of how much of an attention span you can get from your clients, right? So simplicity is key, right? What's the one thing or two things that we as an account team want to get out of this next meeting? And oh, by the way, does that align with our customer? If it doesn't, probably not set up for success. So, I would say for any demo you do, come in, to Heather's point, with a very specific plan. And from a preparation perspective, we as sellers have more time on our hands because we're not commuting. We're not, waiting at the airport to catch a plane. We are in front of our laptops. We have ultimate time to go and do account team planning with your, sales engineers, with your extended team. Let people know what their responsibilities are, right? As account executives, you're the owner of the strategy. And so coming into each of these scheduled demos with that very clear, crystal clear plan with what the outcomes are we're trying to drive, that's key. Otherwise, it's show up, wing it, and cross your fingers that hope that you'll come to a mutually good outcome with you and your customer. It doesn't work.
Yeah. I love that. And if you can, it's almost counterintuitive because you're taught to, use the whole, 30 minutes you have. But if you can give people back 5 more minutes so that they can have a coffee, and you say that right at the get-go, like, hey, I'm going to try and make this 25 minutes because I know you're jumping on a Zoom right after this. Hopefully you can, grab a cup of coffee or something. People are going to really, really like that. And it shows a level of self-awareness, like you talked about, Michael. Mark, similar question, but talking through a little bit about quoting and contract, that part of the stage, and some things you've seen working. And I'm actually going to ask the question through a question we got from the community, which is from Giselle. She says, to piggyback on Carly's question, what about if you've moved past the quote stage and you present them with the contract? So you're actually like, this is the full agreement, and they go dark. What is the best practice to provide contract agreements and make sure that this doesn't happen?
That's always a tough one. It's always tough when they go dark at any point in the stage, right? I think it's hardest when you think that you provided a quote, they seem okay with it, and all of a sudden you provide whatever MSA, whatever contract agreements, and all of a sudden then it goes dark. You feel like, all right, this is weird because I thought we were good. Usually the pricing stage, right? Like you give them the big number, that's usually when they leave you, right? It's not usually at the deal making time. I've always found that's the hardest part. A lot of it has to do from someone who's been on both sides of it, buyer and seller. A lot of it has to do with internal issues, right? Usually they provide it to legal, they provide it to ComOps, whoever it may be, who's got to look over the contract. Sometimes it gets hung up. Sometimes I find out there's internal politics going on, whatever it may be. I found that it's helpful to reach out to them and say, hey, would be more beneficial for us to have our legal people meet with your legal people, right? Kind of, help you remove yourself from the process, right? Have them hammer it out, right? I'll be there for the whole process. I'll walk them through it, talk them through whatever problems they got, but kind of, help them usher through their own internal politics, right? By providing that kind of service. Because, I found that a lot of people in the legal contract reviewers love to send those nasty emails. They're kind of keyboard warriors, right? But if you get them on a phone call, right, they're a lot more forgiving, and they're a lot more, more malleable when it comes to moving on terms and T's and C's and everything else, right? Because it's hard, or I say hard. It's a lot easier to be mean by email and say, I'm not moving on this point, right? Or these people got a horrible contract. I'm just not doing it. Right? You get somebody on the phone and actually talk them through, like, hey, what's the pieces about it that are bothering you? Tell me about this, right? You kind of go into discovery session, right? I kind of look at like that's another phase of discovery almost in sales. But this time you're with a different kind of customer, right? Now you're with the legal team, or now you're with whoever, right? So I think it's kind of be, push a little bit, but push with the tone of, hey, I'm here to help. Let my people talk to your people. We'll get this worked through. I know you got politics internally, but let me help you with that, right?
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good tactical tip. I had a leader once tell me, unless they've specifically asked for it, if you're spending more than 30 minutes on an email, call them, and you can get a lot more done over the phone. And like you said, maybe they'll be a little more malleable. I like it. All right, let's spend a little bit of time on tools, maybe some cool tools that are helping yourself or your teams win, and then we'll go through maybe some emerging best practices that everyone is seeing. But let's start with tools, and maybe Michael, I'll go with you on this one. What's the tools tech stack? Is there anything you brought on since COVID? Anything you're doubling down on?
Sure. Yeah, I think each of our different teams have different tools they leverage, right? So at DocuSign, there's many different groups, and I'm sure many of the folks on the call can relate, right? We have our account executives, we have our customer success managers, we have our pre-sales folks for sales engineering, our MDRs, our inside sales reps. There's a number of different people. So there's all kinds of tools in the tech stack. Mm-hmm. From a go-to-market perspective, when we think about like account executives, finding pipeline, progressing pipeline, we adopted Slack not too long ago. I know it's very, popular technology. I've been really pleasantly surprised, especially during the pandemic times with folks being remote. The level of communication we're able to drive internally to get folks on the same page, that's been a really special tool for us. Other things like the outreach tool for our MDRs, as well as the LinkedIn, Sales Navigator. Mark, 15 years ago, that stuff was not too much around, and I think that from a competitive differentiation perspective, folks whose sole responsibilities are to drive pipeline, progress pipeline, learn about your customers, there is so much information out there just by doing your homework. So those are just a couple of the areas we really find valuable.
Yeah, those are huge. I don't think I could do my role without Slack anymore. It's crazy. I think it went down. Was it last week? It was kind of mind blowing. My coworkers probably hate me because I Slack too much. But if I could do everything in instant message, I probably would. I would probably get away from email. Heather, Mark, anything just quickly that you'd want to highlight as far as tools, technology that's helping your teams?
Yeah, I could highlight one. I think we've been using Zoom Info's intent data recently, and that's been a game
Nice.
changer for me, actually, just being able to see, what my prospects are searching for. I think that's been incredibly helpful. Of course, we use DocuSign as well. We use external counsel, and so really happy, easy to collaborate both externally and then with our prospects and buyers and their counsel too. So yeah, those are imperatives of my tech stack.
Totally. Mark, anything on top of that?
Totally. Yeah. One of the big benefits we've been seeing lately is Flowserve's a big company, and we got a lot of sales personnel, and there's a lot of manufacturing plants over the world, and they kind of behave as independent vendors, even though we're all under the same umbrella. And what's coming from that, from the years of doing it, is there's a lot of independent deals that are done, right? But all with the same customer. And we never really had the insights to know that someone in Town, right, in Maryland, is doing a deal with Shell, right, for a bunch of seals. And then some other guy out of like Hastings, Nebraska, is doing the same deal, with Shell, but on pumps or valves or whatever it may be, right? Problem is we have different contracts everywhere, different agreements, different T's and C's, right? Everything else is different. But really what mattered more to me about that is not just the T's and C's and that piece of it. That doesn't matter. That's liability, right? That's risk. What matters more is we're giving them different pricing, right? Or we're not fully utilizing, the entire, sales channel, right? So there's a benefit to kind of knowing that someone out there is doing something on pumps for them. Well, it's like, hey, these guys are also doing valves over here. Why don't we package this up together and we can make it a much better deal, right? Because now we're not going to the exec saying, hey, I just sold $100,000 in pumps. They're going to go like, whatever, congratulations. We say, hey, I'm sold a $100,000 package of pumps, and also I was able to get in the door another $200,000 in seals. Right now, they kind of see that you're leveraging numerous different products, right? You're selling not just one thing. You're not being very, single focused, right? You're kind of selling the whole company, right? Selling all our products, right? And before we had contract lifecycle management through DocuSign, we didn't have that ability, right? We didn't know where these contracts come from, didn't know where the sales would come from. Having this linked into Salesforce brings us another whole other level of optics into who's talking to who's making these deals, right? And this is kind of how you see a lot of our sales cycles are very long for our big projects, right? It's nuclear deals, it's big refineries, things like that. And these things get, parsed out to sometimes engineering firms, they get parsed out to, general contractors. So if we're able to see where this is coming from, originating from, we're saying, what is the Shell plan? But I see that the guy in between is just some general contractor. I can put this under the Shell deal and get a lot better pricing and I'd be a whole lot more competitive. But if you don't have the kind of optics, right, you don't have a way to track that, then it really kind of puts you at a disadvantage, right? Kind of asymmetrical information, right? Your competitors may know that and you may not, and they're going to throw a deal out there that's not going to be very competitive. So it's really beneficial to have all your ducks in one, all your eggs in one basket, all in place, all the information you can.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that level of insight is the difference between, maybe being able to sell to a business unit and then being able to coordinate an entire enterprise deal, especially if you have multiple products and services you can sell into it. All right, we have 3 minutes, so I'm gonna do kind of a speed round if you'll humor me, because we got some great questions, and I'll just go through them quickly. So here's one. I work for a large tech company, and Michael, I'm gonna ask you this one. I think it'll be relevant for you. I work for a large tech company. I'm in my mid-20s, and I cover our enterprise accounts. I'm stoked about the opportunity, but it's also quite daunting. I'm not an expert in many products, though I really try, nor am I an expert on the industry. It's causing my confidence to wane and even causing me to pause in reaching out to call my clients, either current or potential. How can I build strong relationships and move deals forward, even though I don't yet have that prominent expertise that I'd love to have? Excellent question.
Absolutely. Great question. Love the humility as well. And I think that's step one to improving, right? Because folks that come in and say, hey, I know everything. Let me talk to my customers and make stuff up. That doesn't work. One of the beauties is, and I guarantee this is the case, you're going to have a heck of an ecosystem around you where you go to your peers, you go to your extended team and say, hey, here's my situation. I need some help. Would love your counsel. Would love your guidance, your advice. Bingo. Pull people in. Don't be afraid to ask for help. The second component, I'll be quick, is around mentorship. Go find a mentor, right? People want to help good people. So go take the first step to go and make that happen.
Yeah, huge. All right, here's another one. This is coming from Sean. Mark, I think I'm going to hit you with this one. And Heather, I would love your input too. With the shift to digital and remote, how are your organizations working with professional services and SI partners to successfully deploy large, complex projects that would typically require in-person enablement, training, and change management? Great question. So can't have the boots on the ground like we used to on some of these complex projects. Mark, what are your thoughts there? Are you still charging for that? What does that look like today? Is it completely shifted? Are you doubling down on digital training, onboarding? What does it look like?
I love the digital training and onboarding for sure. Our customers are very used to coming out and checking out their products while they're being built, right? Some of these things are massive, like they're huge. They fit on trucks or the side of the houses, right? So a lot of the guys are used to flying out, coming out, kind of doing the dog and pony show, right? Show them what's being built, show them how to look, right? They can put their hands on it, they can ask questions, right? Well, those days are, a little bit behind us now. So a lot of what we're doing now is doing video. We're taking mobile video systems, going out and showing the guys the shop floor, right? Showing them the product and showing them where it's at. And they can ask questions in a live environment saying, hey, why is that this color? Or, hey, I thought we were going to put the hand turn wheel on the other side, right? Those kind of random questions will come up when they're seeing it. Now you can do it all in a live environment, right? So it's really kind of value add, kind of adding that what used to be in person, now digitally. And a lot of guys are appreciating it because it means they can save travel time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge. Doubling down on, video, on digital training, on even like some sort of, university or something for clients, customers, so they can really learn at their own pace. Heather, anything from your perspective you'd add there?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think just also doubling down on your tech stack that you have. So looking across your organization. So when I was leading a customer success team, we doubled down on digital onboarding and used tools like Outreach, embedded videos via Vidyard, had a full kind of almost course, if you will. So look across your organization to see what other technology is available to you and then borrow best practices from, other groups within your own organization.
Yeah. I love it. And we are 1 minute over. I know you are all busy people, so I'm gonna stop it there. I could continue picking your brains probably all day long. You guys are an absolute wealth of knowledge, so thank you for sharing it with the Sales Hacker community. And everyone who joined us, thank you for such thoughtful questions. I know we went a bit over. Most people have stayed with us the whole time. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.